Okay, welcome everyone. Very good to see so many of you today on a sunny day as well. I wasn't hoping for this nice weather. It's on, right? Yeah, the mic is on. Yes, good. So my name is Ludovica Serratrice, and as you might guess from my name, I am also not a native speaker of English, okay? So originally I'm from Italy, from a city called Turin in northern Italy. But I've now lived in this country, in England and Scotland, for more than half of my life. So I'm now in between places. So, Italian, English. And I speak, Italian obviously is my native language. I speak English and I speak French, but I'm a little bit rusty because I don't really use it that much anymore. And it was now, so I still sort of use my knowledge of languages because, as Dominic was saying, I work here at the university, also in the Center for Literacy and Multilingualism, that really brings together a lot of people that are interested in language development, in children like yourselves who are, learning one or more languages as they grow up. And I also work on the speech and language therapy degree and again training students who will then go to work and help children and adults that have got speech, language and communication difficulties. So my job really is all about language, and that's what I do. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to try the activities on the activity sheets that we prepared. So maybe we could start, see if we got answers to these questions. Let's start from the easy question. And so there is a little bit about linguistic diversity, how many different languages they have in Papua New Guinea, which is the country in the world that has got the most number of languages. So let's see, hands up if people think it's 27. Okay, some people think it's 27. Okay, what about 240? Okay, all right, hands down. How many people think it's got 841? Okay, brave, and you were right. It's 841 different languages, okay, in one single country. So that's multilingualism. I don't know if that is, and I don't know what is. Okay. The other question is a little bit trickier, and I left it deliberately vague. So it says, can you rank the following languages by number of speakers? Okay, let's maybe, because it's going to be a little bit difficult to do this as a group, let's see how many people think that the most spoken language all over the world is Chinese. Okay. About half of the people. How many people think it's English? Okay, I have to say you're both right. Okay, why? Because when there was two different ways of asking this question, right? If you're looking at people whose native language, whose first language, then it is Chinese, right? Because there are a lot of people out there that speak Chinese, and that is their native language. But when we're asking, we're including people that speak a language, as a second, third, or fourth language, then it's English, because a lot of people over the world have got English as an additional language, okay? So most of us here have got it, as a first or second, but, a lot of people all over the world have got English as a second language. So both Chinese and English are right answers, okay? And you'll find this a lot during the talk when you ask me things, and I'll probably go, it depends, okay? So, it's not an exact science. Okay. But what about languages all over the world? Okay, how many living languages do we have in the world at the moment? And I include sign languages, because sign languages, and we're very fortunate here to have Richard, who is our BSL, British Sign Language interpreter. Sign languages are languages, for all intents and purposes. So, okay, hands up again. How many people think it's 5,000? Okay, not many. What about 1,200? Does it seem more realistic? No. So I'm assuming most people think it's 7,000? Yes, and you are right. Okay, so again, depending on estimates, but roughly there are about 7,164 living languages, and that includes between 150 and 200 sign languages. Again, I say depends because it depends whether people think there's two languages are actual two distinct languages or dialects of the same language, okay? But a lot of sign languages out there as well. So a lot of languages. But, so when you've got so many different languages, what do linguists do? They find, some languages are closer to each other than others. So for example, English is closer to, I don't know, German and Dutch than it is to Italian or Spanish, okay? So have you ever heard of language families? Have you ever heard about language families? You have, great. So linguists sort of divide things up, and there are, broadly speaking, so here I have only listed the 6 main language families. And just to give you a sense of like how many languages are in each, look at that. Like, the largest language family is the language family of African languages. So Niger, Congo has got like more than 1,500 languages. Where do you think English is? So we've got Niger, Congo, Austronesian, Trans-New Guinea, Sino-Tibetan, Indo-European, and Afro-Asiatic. Where do you think English is? Yes, where do you think it is? Indo-European, exactly. Thank you, Mom. Okay. So English is in the family of Indo-European languages. So when you look, you compare the Indo-European family to the other family. It's quite a small family, right? Compared, to the other ones. But look at this. Okay. This is the world spread of Indo-European languages. English is one of them. Of course, this is not just English. And sort of this map has got the languages that are Indo-European, like Greek, like Italian, like a lot of the Dravidian languages in India as well. So a relatively small family, but really spread out. And I don't have a map here, but if I showed you a map of the Niger-Congo languages, they would only be in Africa. Okay, these are the languages for which they're mainly found in Africa. Okay, then I said living languages, but have you heard about the issue of endangered languages? You're nodding. What's an endangered language?
A language that doesn't exist anymore, like Latin.
Almost endangered.
Oh yeah, endangered. It's close to not being.
Exactly. There is a danger they might become extinct. Okay, which means that people don't speak that language anymore. But you're right, Latin is a language, but it's not a living language, as in there are no native speakers of Latin, right? Okay, there are people. Well, I don't say I speak Latin. I can understand Latin because I did it at school, but I wouldn't say I'm a speaker of Latin, okay? So there are a lot of scholars of Latin, but not people for whom it's their main language. So if you look at here, this is a bit of a complex graph, but the important thing, look at the left, it said 43% of the world's languages are endangered, okay? So it means that almost half of the world's languages run the risk of becoming extinct. Okay? And the reason why a language becomes extinct is that there are no more people that speak it. Okay? There are, of course, many reasons why that might happen, but the more obvious reason is that parents don't pass on the language to their children. Okay? So this is how a language really becomes extinct. So bearing in mind that it's an issue. So the UNESCO has got a World Atlases of Languages. They often do campaigns for language revitalization and to let people know that not to take languages for granted, so to speak. Okay, so I didn't ask you how many billion people are in the world. I'll tell you. Actually, I don't know. I found out as I was doing research for this talk that there is a clock that you can look. There is a website that basically is updated in real time, and it tells you how many people are born and die every single second. So if you want, you can go and look at it, and it tells you how many people are there in the world at this moment in time. There are about 8 billion people. Okay, a lot of people, but also a lot of languages, but fewer languages than people. And also, again, as we know from this room already, when sort of Gemma gave me the list of the people that had signed up for this talk, I discovered that people reported 39 different languages. Again, I don't know if all of the people that signed up actually came, probably not, but there are many different languages in this room, okay? And I'm going to ask you in a second a question about your multilingualism and that of your parents as well. So 7,000 languages, 8 billion people. I don't know if anybody has heard of the census. Do you know what the census is? Do you remember your parents? You do. Somebody who's going, you think you know. What is it? Yes, exactly. So every 10 years, this survey, this questionnaire, this list of questions goes round, and they ask families a lot of different things, right? And one of the things in 2011, for the first time, they asked a question about languages. They asked, what is the main language that you speak? Okay, so only in 2011. And there was a census relatively recently in 2021, so about 3 years ago. So maybe you remember your parents filling it in. According to the latest census, to the latest survey, almost 1 in 10 people in England and Wales speak a language, have a main language that is not either English or Welsh. Okay, so it means that these people speak more than one language, but their main language is not English or Welsh. Okay, and I wonder, and so here on the left there is a map of England and Wales, and the light green are areas where we've got monolingual households. That is, families where they only speak one language. Okay, and the darker the green and the blue are, it means that there is like a higher number of people that have more than one language in their family, okay? So unsurprising, I don't have a pointer, but you can probably guess the one, in the southeast is the London area. So London, of course, and, London and the greater London area, and I guess Reading is probably part of that as well. So a lot of different languages. And I'm assuming most of you come from Reading today? Yes? Yeah? So very, and then also there are pockets, as you can see, in the northwest of England. So the Manchester area. I lived in Manchester for 17 years, and I can tell you that it's a very multilingual city. Okay, so you can see that there is geographic variation, but you can see that there are multilingual households in the UK. It's not Papua New Guinea, but still, Okay, so I wonder if you can tell me. Do you know which are the 2 languages, okay, that are the top 2 non-English, non-Welsh at the moment? Do you know? What's the language that a lot of people speak as a main language that is not English? Or let's have some languages. What do you think?
German.
You think German. What do you think? French. French too, okay. Yes, at the back? Chinese? What did he say? Chinese? Polish? Polish. Okay, so the lady in the red top wins this mini competition. It is Polish, okay? So Polish has got more than 500,000 speakers, and it is indeed the most commonly spoken language in the UK, apart from English and Welsh, okay? What about the second one? I think is going to be harder to guess. You know? Punjabi? No? Urdu? Okay, I'm not saying anything, but continue. Couple more? At the back? Yeah, you. Arabic? Okay, one more and then we'll, yeah. What do you think? Hindi? Sadly, we don't have a winner. The second most, but it's a very recent addition. So Romanian, according to the 2021 census, shot up. Okay, so in the last 10 years, there have been a lot of Romanian speakers that have arrived in the UK. Also interesting to see all the languages that are going up are European languages, okay? So you see Romanian really shooting up, but then Portuguese and Spanish and even Italian, making there are more people that are coming from Italy to the UK. But then as you can see, some of you said Urdu, Punjabi. You can see those languages are going down a little bit. Punjabi, Urdu, Bengali, Gujarati, and Arabic are going down a little bit. And I don't know what's happening with French. The French has decided that they want to go. But why do you think that these languages So, Romanian and Persian, relatively sort of new arrivals. But what about those languages like Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati? Why do you think the fewer people are saying, this is my main language? Maybe I'll tell you. So these are languages, their community languages are well established. So people have been here for several generations. And then it's not uncommon that in the second and third generation, the parents, the grandparents will not pass on the language, okay, as much to their children, okay, because they're like second or third generation already, as opposed to somebody from Poland, Italy, or Romania, who's a very recent arrival, okay, for whom that language is their first language, okay. So it's interesting to see, the variety of languages and what happens in the UK. So this is the question that I have for you. So who is multilingual, okay? So first of all, put your hand up if in your language, in your family, you've got 2 or more languages, meaning you've got another language other than English. Okay, quite a few people. Okay, so all the bilinguals and multilinguals are here. Great, fantastic. Now I'm going to ask the parents a question. Okay, so parents, put your hand up if you've ever tried to learn a language, not as a native language, a second language. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I can see here that, as they say, I am preaching to the choir, okay? So don't have to convince you that languages are fab and that multilingualism is great. But also there may be some, I don't know, maybe some people wanted to put their hand up and they didn't because I thought like, am I multilingual? Am I bilingual? I understand, but I don't speak it. So sometimes, when I always ask this question to my students, is that who is multilingual? And a lot of the time people have this idea that to be bilingual, to be multilingual, you have to be super competent, super proficient in all languages, be able to not only understand them, but speak them, maybe read and write in these languages. And it's not often the case, okay? So again, and also our competence varies. For example, in my case, Italian is my native language, but there are things that I do much better in English than in Italian. Okay, so for example, when I have to talk about work, it's really difficult for me to talk about work in Italian because I do all my reading, all my writing in English. Okay, so paradoxically, although Italian is my first language, and I don't know if this is the experience of some of you in the audience as well, when you're in between languages, so I see some people nodding, that, the language, your native language is not the language that you use more often anymore, okay? So there is that. Okay, so now we're going to get into sort of the deeper things, and we're going to talk about mostly sort of 2 big things. We're going to talk about what we can learn about studying bilingual babies and children, and also a little bit about what we can learn from differences between languages. What can they tell us? Okay, so we'll start from like very young babies. Okay, so I'm assuming that you can all tell, whether somebody's speaking a language that you don't speak because you don't understand it, right? And we use language to communicate. So clearly somebody is speaking to you, you do not understand what they're saying. If it doesn't sound like English, if there are no words that you recognize, you make the right assumption that they're speaking another language, okay? Because you're going by meaning. But babies, newborn babies or babies that are a couple of months old or even 5 months old, they do not understand words, okay? So children start understanding, words around the first year of life, but babies don't, okay? So and also if you ask them, is this language different from another, they can't tell you. But we have found a way of asking children. I'm not asking you to read this because you can't, but some of you might recognize it as the IPA, which is not a beer, but the International Phonetic Alphabet, okay? So most of you here will have, I'm assuming maybe there are some children that are not in school yet, but those of you who are in school will have had to deal with the really, really, really hard task of learning to read and write in English, which is a nightmare, right? As you know, phonics and all that, because there is no one-to-one correspondence between the sounds and the letters, right? A lot of sounds have got many different ways in which you can write that sound and vice versa. The same spelling can have different sounds. So it's very difficult to learn to read and write in English. So well done to those of you who are trying to do that. But the linguists have come up with like an amazing idea, which is if we all use the IPA to read and write, there'd be no problems, because in the International Phonetic Alphabet, each symbol corresponds to a sound and only that sound. So if there was like a revolution across the world and we decided to adopt the IPA, it'd be fine, okay? But it's not like that. So this is just to give you a sense. These are all of the possible sounds in natural languages, okay? And then languages of the world will have a subset, a smaller set of those sounds, okay? So as you know, there are some sounds in English that are not in German and vice versa. Some sounds in Chinese that are in English and not in Chinese and vice versa, okay? So language is obviously different because they've got different sounds. But languages also different in interesting ways. Languages have got different rhythms, okay? So the prosody of languages is different. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience. Maybe you're in a room and there is somebody talking next door. You cannot make out the individual sounds, but you can make out the intonation. And you can tell that it's not English or a language that you know, okay? Because of the rhythm of the language. And you're right, okay? Because languages are divided, and I'm not going to go into the technical details, but they've got different rhythms, okay? Stress time, syllable time, and moratime languages, okay? So just the only thing that you have to remember is that there are different classes of rhythm, different intonations in languages of the world. And I've highlighted Russian and French because I'm going to talk to you about an experiment that they did with newborn babies that were born in a French-speaking family. And they wanted to know whether these babies could tell apart French from another language, Russian, okay? And notice that French is a syllable-timed language, so that's the rhythm, and Russian has got a different type of rhythm. So can babies tell them apart? Do you have any idea how they might have done that? Yes, you do. Yes, yes, you're a little budding linguist, okay? That's exactly what they did. Okay, so there is this experimental paradigm where they put like headphones on this poor baby. The baby can't speak, but babies are very good at sucking on dummies, okay? And when they're excited, because there is something interesting in their environment, they suck faster, right? They really go at it. So what they did in this experiment, they said, okay, so let's hook this baby up with like a dummy to a computer and we can see how fast they're sucking. First of all, like the baby's just there, they're not listening to anything. They just want to see what their base, their normal sucking rate is. Then they play them French, exactly like you were saying. And the baby is excited because, there was nothing. And then there is, an interesting sound. They don't understand French, but they're born in a French-speaking family, so thinking, oh, okay, great. And they get excited. So you can see the peak, like, that green line going up. That's the rate of sucking because it's fast. Then after a while, the baby gets bored. I mean, it's interesting, but not that amazing. So after a while, you can see the green line going down again, okay? So the baby gets bored, stops sucking so fast. Then what do? Okay, they play either French again, in which case they're bored, nothing happened, and they play them, or they play them Russian. We know that Russian is different, but do the babies know that Russian is different? The babies know because look at that red line, okay? That really went up because they noticed the difference. So this is a way of trying to ask babies if they notice differences between languages without actually asking them, okay? But just by looking at what they do in their environment. Then when children are a little bit older, the sucking is not that important to them anymore. But children are very good at sort of looking at things that they're interested in. Okay, so this other experimental setup is called the preferential looking paradigm. Okay, so the child is sat on their mom's lap, and then there are like two screens, and here, for example, there are two images, and they hear something like, she's kissing the keys, okay? So there is a kissing scene in both pictures. There are keys and an apple in both pictures, but where do you think the baby should look if they hear she's kissing the keys? Left. To the left, exactly, because it's the right picture for that sentence, okay? So again, we're asking children, do you understand what we're saying to you? And they can't say yes or no, but we can, we can make an inference from where they're looking, okay? And they should look at the things that they match. So using this paradigm, they did a very interesting experiment, okay? My mom always tells me that she can tell if somebody's a French speaker just by looking at the way, not by hearing what they're saying, but by the shape of their mouth. And a long time ago, I just thinking, oh, come on, that can't be right. But actually, no, she was onto something, okay? Because this is an experiment that they did with bilingual babies that were in a family where they had French and English. And then monolingual babies, they only heard English, okay? So what they did is they played silent videos. So these children could not hear what these ladies were saying. So the lady on the left was reading a passage from The Little Prince, like a children's book. The lady on the right was also reading The Little Prince, but she was reading that in French, okay? Le Petit Prince, okay? So the children were looking at these women, silent. They couldn't hear, they could only see their faces and their lips. And for a while, so they could match, lady on the left with English, lady on the right with French. What do they think they did? Swap them round, okay? So the lady they used to be matched with French now was speaking English, okay? And the other way round. And they wanted to see whether the children could see the difference just by looking at the shape of the mouth. And long story short, the monolingual babies couldn't do that, but the bilingual babies could do it. So the bilingual English-French babies could tell the difference just by looking at somebody's mouth, okay? But you're thinking, okay, these are bilingual babies, they hear English, they hear French, they know these languages. The amazing thing that they did exactly the same experiment with Catalan and Spanish-speaking babies that they've never seen, never heard English or French, and they could do it. Okay? So there is something about bilingual babies that really makes them look at people's mouths more carefully. We know that from other independent research. So monolingual babies, so children that only speak that hear one language, are interested, obviously when you're looking at the face, you're looking at the mouth and looking at the eyes, right? They're interesting for children or for anyone really. But by the age of 12 months, the monolingual babies tend to look at the eyes while the bilingual babies still look at the mouth. And the reason why is that if you're a bilingual child and you're in an environment where you're exposed to different languages, you never know who's going to speak what to you, right? So sometimes it could be German, sometimes it could be English, or whatever languages you've got in your environment. So in a way, you have to be more open about the possibilities that things might be different. If you're a monolingual baby and you only ever expect to hear English or Urdu or Chinese, you don't have to worry about it, okay? So I thought that was quite a cool experiment. Okay. So now let's look a little bit at how bilingual children learn words, okay? So language obviously is made up of words. What happens? So there is this, again, a fancy sort of word, which is called, and I'll explain what it means, the mutual exclusivity principle, which means that basically it's either one thing or the other. So when you're a child, you know that thing is a ball, and you're thinking, okay, I don't actually need to know that it's also a toy. The principle for a child is like one object, one word, okay? And this makes sense because you're a child, you don't know many words. You really have to try and learn not synonyms for the same object, but as many labels, as many words as possible for as many objects, okay? So if you know the word for ball, that's it. You reject toy when you're a child. So let's do this experiment, okay? So I'm going to ask you, so this is what they do to see whether children are sensitive to this exclusivity principle. So you show them two objects that they know and you say, look at the car. So where would you look? To the right, okay? Then they say, look at the plane. You're still looking at the right, but this time you're looking at a plane. Then they say, okay, now it's a bit different because there is an object that they know and they know the word for, and they say, look at the plate. And they will still look at the plate. But what happens now? If I say, look at the DAX, where would you look? To the left or to the right? To the left, okay? Okay, so that makes sense because you're thinking, this is a word I've never heard. This is an object I've never seen. Surely that's what they're talking about, right? And fine, this is what monolingual children do. Bilingual children do something different. Bilingual children are a lot more unsure. They do look at the plate as well. And why would you? Because if you're a bilingual child, you need to be open to the fact that the same object actually has multiple labels, okay? So multiple words, like, you know, a word in German, a word in English, a word in Greek, a word in, okay. So looking at bilingual babies, we've also see how the environment in which you're born shapes the way in which you learn, okay? So that was a cool thing, I thought. Then another thing, again, you know, if you're a bilingual child, you know, you might wonder, like, do you know as many words as other monolingual children? Do you know fewer? First of all, how do we count words? Okay, so if you're very young, you know, and we can't ask you directly, we'll ask your parents. So you can give a parent a word list and say, does your child understand owl or penguin or turtle? And then you ask the parent to tick the box, and then you count, you know, the words that they've got. With children who are about 3 or older, we can actually ask them. I don't know if you've ever done a task like this. You know, you have, for example, 4 pictures, and I say, show me the apple, okay? And you point to the picture of the apple. Or I can say, what is this? Okay, and you tell me. A butterfly. Okay, great. Okay, so what about bilingual children? Do they have more words than monolingual children? The same? Fewer? Okay, so let's look at this child here, for example. On the left, we've got a bilingual child. On the right, we've got a monolingual child. And you can see that some of the words are, you know, so the words in red are English words, and the words in, you know, in the green bubbles are Italian words. You can see that some words are the same across, you know, for the 2 children. So like dog, cat, and bird, you know, the child knows, and so does the monolingual child. But then the bilingual child also has, you know, knows some words in Italian that they don't know in English, okay, and vice versa. So what do? Do we count? So there are different ways of counting words, right? So you can either count all of the words that the child says, in which case you probably, bilingual children, if you just count all of the words, they tend to have more words than a monolingual child of the same age. Or you could just count the concept. So if you've got cat and gatto, you don't give 2 points, but you only give 1 because you count the concept. Regardless, when you're looking just at the concepts, again, monolingual children and bilingual children are the same. So although when you're looking at, you know, just the one language, bilingual children may know fewer words in one language than children who only ever hear that one language, because their life is divided across 2 environments, right? But when you count it all up, bilingual children are not, you know, in any way disadvantaged. If anything, you know, they've got the advantage that they know the same thing in 2 languages. Okay. And lastly, I just want to say something about how we think in, you know, how, whether the languages that we speak, in a way, shape the way in which we see the world, okay? Again, another fancy word, it's called linguistic relativity. So the idea that there isn't like an absolute way, just one way of looking at the world, but the, you know, the way in which you speak, the language that you speak, makes you pay attention to things a little bit differently, okay? So we're going to talk very briefly about 3 different domains that are common to the experience of all human beings, really. So we all live in space, we all live in time, and color is all around us, okay? So these are very basic sort of experiences of our lives. Okay, so if I had to ask you for directions, and I said, which way to the church, please? If you look at this picture, what would you say? Yes, where is the church?
Past the cinema. Past the cinema.
Past the cinema, okay? Or maybe you can say like, you know, the church is to the right of the cinema, okay? Next to the cinema, things like that. Okay. So there are different ways, again. So this is what we would say, but have you ever thought do you know about cardinal points? Like north, south, east, west? Yeah, okay, these are cardinal points, okay? Why left and right are, the frame of reference for left and right is relative, right? Because my left is your right, okay? So when you're saying left and right, it can be a little bit confusing. It's like, you mean my left, my right, your right. So when you're giving somebody direction, it can be very confusing, okay? But there is a way, and this is also a way, for example, if you ever I don't know if people read maps anymore because we've got like, you know, Google that tells you just where to go. And to be honest, I don't know what the north is here. I've no idea. But also we can also, is that over there? Okay, so north is over there. But to be honest, I mean, we don't normally need to know where the north, the west, the south, and the east is. You know, we can get by without it, and we can use left and right. But if you are somebody, for example, living in the Australian bush, knowing where the north, the south, the east, or the west are could be a matter of life and death. Okay, because if you're walking south and you should be walking north, you know, you may sort of end up, I don't know, not finding an oasis, and there should be, you know, there will be no water, you'll die of thirst. So having an absolute frame of reference can be very useful. And while in English we can use both the relative, the absolute frame of reference, there are languages that only use the absolute frame of reference. So they would say, so, you know, these Aboriginal people that lives in North Queensland will say something like, there is an ant on your south leg, right? Which is, to us, a bit of a silly thing, but this is how they see the world, okay? So this is what they do. Okay, time again. Can you probably, do you know what a metaphor is? Yes. Wow, okay. What is a metaphor?
It's where you compare something with another thing.
Yes, you can have an analogy. You're comparing two different things. Excellent. Yes.
So a metaphor is technically saying that something is something else. It's an extreme version of the thing that you're saying.
Okay, so we're basically saying something is something else. Okay, so I see that you're very well versed in metaphors and figurative language. Excellent. So normally in English and in a lot of other languages, there is a metaphor for time that is grounded, there is in space, okay? So normally we say that the future is ahead of us and the past is behind us, right? We say we look forward to something that is going to happen in the future, and you look back onto something that happened in the past, okay? So there is and there are a lot of metaphors, a lot of, you know, things that really have this past and present and future on this axis, okay? So before you or behind you. But that's not the case in all languages, okay? So for example, in Chinese and in other languages, there are a lot of metaphors where it's on the vertical axis. And I see somebody nodding. Would you say that if you think about metaphors in Chinese, if there are any Chinese speakers, there are a lot more metaphors on the vertical axis, okay? So typically, the past is above you and the future is below you. Even in English, if you think about it, you know, you can hand things down over generation, okay? So there is this idea that the past is above and you're giving things to the people that come after you. But it's not a very common, so you went like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's right. Because it's not a very common way in English of conceptualizing the past and the future. So again, you know, different ways of conceptualizing the world around us. Finally, last thing, something about color. Okay, so I put these sort of, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is English at the bottom, Jihai, which is a language spoken in Malaysia. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see the line, the two languages divide up the color space in different ways, okay? So for example, if you look at the top right-hand corner, look at those 6 chips that we would say are pink in English, But in Jahai, actually, one of them is yellow, okay? The other ones are red. So they divide up the color space in different ways. So I know there is at least one Greek speaker in the audience. So I know, for example, that Greek has got two different terms for different shades of blue, right? So does Italian, so does Russian. But English doesn't, okay? You can just say darker blue, lighter blue, but they don't have two different words, okay? And this is important because of the last thing I'm going to talk about. Okay, so they've done a lot of experiments with the speakers of English or speakers of Russian or of Greek. I'm going to give you an example of Greek. So like I said, English doesn't really have two different names for these two different shades of color, but Russian does. Are there any Russian speakers? Not today, okay. So I can try to pronounce it because nobody will tell me I'm wrong. So sinyi and golboy, okay? So sinyi is darker blue and golboy is lighter blue, okay. Now, this is the task and see if you can do it, okay. So the task to see, and I'll explain in a minute what we can infer from this task. The task is to match, okay, the square on the bottom left and say if it's the same as the top one or not. Do this, and so do you think that, is it the same or not? I'm telling you that it is the same, so trust me, okay? Somebody was shaking their head, but it is the same. Is it easier to do this task in either of these two? Can you say that it's, you would say, yeah, it's blue, right? So it's not particularly difficult in either of these two conditions or particularly easy, okay? But actually, for Russian speakers, it's a lot quicker to do it for quadrant number 1 than in 2, okay? You might not believe me, but if I show you something in English, you will believe me. Okay, let's do the same. So English has two different terms for green and blue. Some languages don't, by the way. They don't have two different terms for green and blue. Do the task now. Which one is easier? Which one is easier to say if the quadrant in the bottom left is the same as the top? 1 or 2? 1. Why? Because here, yeah, you say that, right? But you've used the color terms because you do have terms that really divide very neatly green and blue, okay? So this is what you do, thinking for you it's obvious that these two are different. But if you didn't have this distinction, and I'm talking about hundreds of milliseconds, by the way, right? So when you say it's faster or it's easier, we're talking about tiny, tiny, minuscule difference. Of course, anybody can do this task. Everybody can perceive the difference. But if the language that you speak also makes this distinction, making the distinction comes much quicker to you, okay? So in a way, the language that you speak also makes you perceive colors differently. Okay, so I think this is the last thing I wanted to say. I just wanted to, leave you with like 3 short take-home messages, sort of things that I hope you will remember. So, we've talked, scratched the teeny, tiny surface, but even if I had more time, the research that we've got out there covers like a tiny percentage of the world's languages, right? We said we've got more than 7,000, and yet we know very little about all of these different languages. We know a lot about English, a lot of Indo-European languages, not so much about other languages. Also, again, I hope I've given you a little bit of a hint that languages actually do vary in fascinating ways, okay? And just sometimes there is a reason, sometimes who knows why. And also I hope, when we're talking about endangered languages and passing down, a vertical metaphor for time, passing down your language knowledge across generations, that it's important, right, to preserve, to keep language diversity. So those of you who've got 1, 2, 3 different languages, pass them on to your children, okay? Because this is a way in which you're keeping languages alive, but also the richness, the rich tapestry of diversity that we've got in our communities. And I think this is it. I just wanted to thank you And also, are you going to do reminders? Dominic, you're going to do reminders. So this is all I had to say. You've been an incredibly attentive audience, I have to say. Now I'm slightly scared about the kind of questions that you're going to ask me, because they're going to be difficult, but I'll try. If I don't know it, I'll just say I don't know. Okay, thank you.